I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode, goodness gracious, of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. I'm just so choked up to be back, guys. Missed an episode last week, and I can't contain my emotions.
I thought it was Monday. Your excitement about the NFC East just had you in the field.
No, I was choking maybe on like the vomit when I realized the two teams that we're about to talk about in the NFC East. But yeah, we are back for Monday, and as I mentioned last week, we got to start getting into breaking down some of these teams as we're a lot closer to the football season than we may realize. So we are going to start with the NFC East today. We're going to talk about the Washington football team and the New York Giants, but it is Monday. So as always, we've got Dennis and Matt here. Gentlemen, how you guys doing on this beautiful Monday?
No, I'm doing pretty good. I'm in a rookie draft with you. It's the oldest dynasty league that we're in together. So you can tell it's ancient. It's a 1 QB league, and the IDPs are all IDP flex, and there's only 3 of them. So we went back to back in the first round, and I got to ask. I almost offered you the 1-3 and the 1. What did I have? 1-9 or 1-10.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have taken that for the 1-2?
Yes, I would have.
I don't know why. I was sitting there, and I just talked myself into waiting. Because I was debating whether I was going to take – because I was pretty sure you were going to take Najee. And I'm like, man, I really want to take Najee. And then I was like, but, if he takes Najee, then I can take Chase. And the more I looked at my team, I'm like, well, going into the offseason or going into the process, I had Javonte Williams really high. How much am I going to push him down because he landed in Denver? So I'm like, no, I'm just going to stick to my board, and I took Javonte Williams at 3, but I really regret not offering the 102 and the 110 to get Najee Harris.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted Chase. I actually think my team is kind of good. I got kind of killed with injuries last year, and so I don't think my team is horrible. My wide receivers aren't great, though. I mean, at one point last year, due to injuries, I'm looking at my lineup, Larry Fitzgerald and Nelson Aguilar because of injury. So I wanted Chase, but since the Chase went 1, I was like, for me, Najee Harris was the best player on the board, so I just had to take it. But I'd have happily taken 1-3 and 1. And I also had another trade offer, but I didn't really like it, so I ended up just kind of moving on. But yeah, it is definitely rookie drafts. I still have a couple going on, surprisingly enough. We are at 2-9. I was looking to see where we were at, though. Matt, how you doing on this beautiful Monday?
I'm doing pretty good. I still have a few rookie drafts left, too. Then I'm going to tally up and see the shares. I feel like I did a better job this year diversifying my portfolio of rookies than last year, where I think I had the same like 3 people on every team.
Well, after about 10, you had no choice but to diversify because it's such a crapshoot after about 110. You just get there and you just got to go, whatever, I'm just going to take
some of that wide receiver range. I've purposefully taken different people in different leagues just to hedge my bets.
Yeah, I think in the Ultimate Destination League, I'm a little disappointed in myself. In the 4th round, I think I took Jared Dokes because I hoped Jamar Jefferson would make it to me in the 4th or 5th, and it did not happen. I was very sad because I have him in like every other league, so it was a little disappointing, but it is what it is. You may have. I don't know. I took Jared Dokes, and I was like, there's no way anybody's going to take Jamar Jefferson. And then I looked back when I got back on the clock, and it's like, No, what happened to Jamar? He's not here anymore. So yeah, I was a little sad, but I don't have any jokes, and though I'm not one of the people who's going to tell you he's going to be the starter in Miami, I do think he could possibly have some kind of role there. So I figured I'd mix it up a little bit, take someone I didn't have any shares of previously. But again, we are going to be talking about the NFC East. This will be part one. We're going to take care of the Washington football team and the New York Giants today. Then Matt and myself will be live. We will talk about the Dallas Cowboys, Matt's favorite NFC team, and the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that's at least got a lot of intrigue around it, for sure. So starting with Washington, their 2020 finish, they ended up 7-9 and finished first place. They lost in what was a very exciting, at least in my opinion, wild card game with the was it not Heineke? Who was the corner?
Tyler Heineke.
It was Heineke for the Washington football team against Tampa Bay. They lost 31-23. Their key additions this offseason were Ryan Fitzpatrick, Curtis Samuel, Adam Humphries, and William Jackson, the cornerback. Key losses, Alex Smith, who retired, Ryan Kerrigan, who went to Philly, Ronald Darby, the cornerback, who went to Denver. And then their draft picks were Jamin Davis, who I thought was a really good pick there at linebacker, Samuel Cosmi, the offensive tackle in the second, and De'Ami Brown, wide receiver, in the fourth. One of the big questions going into this offseason for Washington was they were a surprise. Will they be a surprise team? Was a surprise team in 2020 winning the weekend NFC East with Ryan Fitzpatrick now at quarterback and Curtis Samuel. How will this offense change for you, Dennis?
Well, the biggest impact I think is going to be on Mckissick and Logan Thomas. I think it'll help Samuel and Terry McLaurin because Fitzpatrick he's much more willing to go down the field. It may even help guys like Antonio Gandy-Golden or Kelvin Harmon, whoever happens to Cam Sims step into that third wide receiver role. I feel like there's a chance that McKissick and Samuel their roles are going to overlap fairly substantially, and that's going to really, as much as I'd love to see McKissick get 100 targets again and then have Gibson's carries go up to like 240, 250. I think Gibson will probably he's going to push 220, I think, for carries as long as he can stay healthy. And he's likely to get a little bit more than the 36 receptions he had. So McKissick could just be shit out of luck this year after really stepping up and playing well. Logan Thomas is just such a wild card because if Fitzpatrick is chucking it down the field, that means guys like Thomas and McKissick and to some extent Samuel may struggle, but the offense overall could be much more explosive, could be really good for Terry McLaurin. He could make that leap into the wide receiver ones, because I think, what was he last season? He was wide receiver 20, and he was somewhere in that range, I think, his first year as well.
Yeah, Samuel was, I think he finished the highest out of the three last year, didn't he? Or was that Robbie Anderson?
No, Robbie Anderson was 19.
Okay,
Yeah.
So then I think Samuel was like 23 or 24 because he wasn't far ahead of Moore, who finished his.
He was
I know
24.
Moore.
Yeah, they were
I know Moore
back-to-back
finished as
with it.
25. Yeah, I knew Moore finished at 25.
So,
But Samuel got the benefit of 200 rushing yards and a couple of rushing TDs,
right.
which I think is what gives him a little bit of an edge over Moore. I'll be curious to see if he gets that same work in Washington.
Well, I think
He's got the same offensive coordinator, right? No, that's right, Joe Brady. My bad.
Well, he could get those manufactured touches because he's taken over some of that J.D. McKissick stuff. So McKissick in his, what did he have, 85 carries? Take 25 of those and give them to Curtis Samuel. It's nothing to sneeze at. He could be Samuel could. I feel like Samuel is probably going to be in that low end wide receiver 2, mid to low wide receiver 2, with McLaurin going up into the wide receiver 1 ranks.
Yeah, I think they'll definitely be a little bit more of an exciting, a little more vertical offense than they were with Alex Smith. I'm with you that the person that probably takes the biggest hit is McKissick, who, a surprise, he was RB17 in PPR last year, and a lot of that is thanks to dump offs. They had Alex Smith in there, they had Haskins in there, they had Kyle Allen in there, they had pretty much everybody you can imagine in there at quarterback last year. I think they're hoping for maybe a little more consistency with Fitzpatrick, and probably hoping for, we've seen over the years there's good Ryan Fitzpatrick and there's can't find a wide open receiver on your own team, Ryan Fitzpatrick. We've talked about before, as he's gotten older, it seems like some of those turnovers and the inconsistency has gone away. If they could get something like what Miami saw at the back half of 2019, when he had that offense really humming, that was great for Devontae Parker. That was great for Mckissick. I think you can see Logan Thomas, Samuel, and McLaren benefit. I'm with you, probably an increased workload for Gibson. He only had 170 carries last year. For as great of a season as he had, finishing kind of as RB13, he only had 765 yards, so we could reasonably see him kind of bump up. Mckissick is probably the one. It seems wildly unbelievable to think he finishes as a top 20 running back again this year.
Yeah, I would be extremely surprised by that. Yeah, I liked the signing of Curtis Samuel. We talked a lot about it. I can't remember where I wanted. I think it was Green Bay was where I was kind of hoping he'd go. But what I was thinking of when I said he has the same offensive coordinator, he did have in his hand, it's Mike Turner's son, right?
Turner's son,
North Turner's son, Mike. There we go. Yeah, I got it was in there somewhere.
That was the season I think Samuel led the league in air yards.
Yeah, it was all coming together in my head, just not the sentence did
Although
not come out
it's
correct.
It's hard to know how much of that was not working with Samuel and how much. You got to remember those 2 seasons, the last 2 seasons in Carolina for Cam Newton were really up and down. And then Kyle Allen started out as like boy wonder and quickly became, I wonder if we should be playing him by the end of that season.
Yeah, well, yeah, so that's why I say I think it's a good thing for him to be there again with Turner, because they do know each other a little bit, and Ryan Fitzpatrick is I can't say he's maybe better at this moment quarterback than Cam Newton. I would not say overall I would still take Cam Newton's career over Ryan Fitzpatrick's been in the league for like 30 years, it feels like now at this point, but I definitely think he's a step up over Kyle Allen, and then some of what we kind of got at Teddy Bridgewater as well last year. So I like the landing spot for them. I do think that it really helps out Terry McLaurin having that serious threat option there in the slot. And then obviously adding a guy like De'Ami Brown. They still got, who is the Antonio Gandy Golden, who they drafted last year that a lot of people are still very high on. Dennis, you mentioned Logan Thomas, his big breakout at tight end last year. And they have very intriguing pieces there on that offense, and then adding Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick into the backfield. So I think this is definitely going to be a fun offense to watch. Can they put it all together? How often can Ryan Fitzpatrick be that really good quarterback? We've talked about it a lot since what we saw last year in Miami. He didn't really have those bad games last year with Miami. Now, how much of that was they kept pulling him out, putting Tua in, and vice versa? Or how much of that is maybe he just not quite forcing the ball as much as he had been in the past? I don't know. But if he can kind of keep going on that ride he was with Miami last year, I think Washington's offense is going to be very good, and they're going to have a lot of very high pieces. So you guys were just a little bit talking about their fantasy finishes and what they possibly could do. I'll go to the wide receivers first. Terry McLaurin at wide receiver 20, Curtis Samuel at 24 last year, obviously not on the same team. Then you add a rookie like De'Ami Brown, and then you have Antonio Gandy Golden. There's someone else that I'm not remembering. Kelvin Harmon, that's who the other guy was a lot of people were very excited about. Do you expect 2 wide receivers to finish in the top 24 again this year? It doesn't have to be McLaurin and Samuel. It can be any of those 4.
I do. And I think if 2 do, it's going to be those 2. Yeah. I just feel like McLaurin had 134 targets last season. I feel like he's going to be pushing 140, 145 targets. And he's going to get a little more yardage, probably get a little bump on his touchdowns. I'm not sure. Let's see, did we have his TD? 6 touchdowns. So if you bump him up Oh, wait, that's Logan. McLaurin,
4
touchdowns. So if you bump him up to 8 touchdowns and give him 5 to 10 more receptions and increases yards per reception by, a yard maybe. I think it was 12.9 last year. That you're pushing wide receiver one pretty comfortably there. So, and then again, well, we know from 2 years ago that Curtis Samuel can go deep because he led the league in air yards. Cam Newton couldn't get the ball to him, or whoever was playing quarterback then, Kyle Allen or whoever. They couldn't get the ball to him, so he only had like 30 receptions, but he led the league in air yards. So having 2 speedsters there, it honestly feels like the offense could be really, really explosive, and their defense, we already know they've got one of the top defenses in the NFL, so they could potentially get a big boost in touchdowns across all positions playing on short fields.
Yeah, and I think touchdowns is probably a place where they make it up. They did not have the most robust passing touchdowns. I agree with Dennis. McLaren probably pushes toward wide receiver 1. He's been tracking that way. I think that Samuel finishes just outside of wide receiver 2 range.
Gotcha. Yeah, in case one of you guys didn't mention and I missed it, they only passed for 16 touchdowns last year between 4 quarterbacks.
Yeah,
so
which looks like lighting the world on fire compared to their fellow NFC East mates who we're about to talk to, who only had 12 passing touchdowns.
That is true. But yeah, I mean, just to kind of put this in context for you guys, like looking at this and what Dennis is talking about, how easy it could be for them. I mean, the next highest guys, unfortunately, in the receiving game was actually J.D. McKissick, although some of that I think came from the injuries at the running back position, how much they were dumping off for those few games there, which led to such a high finish for McKissick, as Matt was mentioning a minute ago. But then Cam Sims, Steven Sims, Dontrell Inman were kind of like the top wide receivers after McLaurin, who almost had literally 100 catches more. 100 targets more than some of those other guys. It was literally just short of that with 90-something with those 3 guys. So I definitely think if you're adding a Curtis Samuel, even if you don't want to go in Antonio Gandy Golden, adding a guy like Curtis Samuel, and then again, I think De'Ami Brown could be really good. Now, I don't think he's going to be up there with any of the other I'm always so college mindset. I always say freshman, rookie wide receivers. Now, I don't think that he's going to finish up there with some of those, but I wouldn't be surprised if he beats out Gandy, Golden, Sims, any of those guys, and ends up being on the outside opposite of Terry McLaurin. But I'm not expecting a big season from him. So, Matt, what are you expecting from Washington in 2021? Dennis just mentioned great defense. We've been talking about how good we think their offense is going to be. They were first place last year. Obviously, very weird year for the NFC East with injuries. Carson Wentz, Daniel Jones, massive steps down. Cowboys look like they're on the bounce back. Giants, we're about to talk about them. A lot of people think this is their year to bounce back. Eagles, got Jalen Hurts, all the things they're doing there. What are you expecting out of Washington in 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I think Washington still has a strong defense. I think that we see their offense being at least a little more consistent and having a little more panache to it, if nothing else. I think they're between 9 and 11 wins, pushing for a playoff berth again. I mean, even 9 wins would be an improvement. They made the playoffs last year, but they were only a 7-9 team. It was more of a battle of attrition in the NFC East last year. So I think you see them pick up 2 to 4 additional wins this year and starting to round into shape.
Dennis?
No, I agree 100%. It's going to be a contest in that division between the Dallas offense and the Washington defense. So it wouldn't surprise me if both of those teams are pushing 12 wins, with Dallas doing it solely on the back of Dak Prescott's arm and Zeke Elliott's rushing. Their defense needs to take some serious steps in Dallas. I could see Washington, though. It's it's not a great comparison to say like, the 95 Bears, because you just don't compare to teams like that. But it feels to me like a team that could have a really, really dominant defense and an offense that still can explode and put up a whole bunch of points, but won't necessarily have to. So I like, 11, 12 wins out of Washington, especially given that they could, Ryan Fitzpatrick has never been on a team where his 5 interception meltdown could still be a 7-0 victory. And I think he gets that with this defense.
Yeah, I think it's very early, but I know when we did our scheduled game stuff last week, I believe I had Washington winning the division, and I think I'm probably going to stick with that. I really like this team. It's funny, actually, in my opinion, because I'm pretty sure it was 2019 I was picking them to win the division. I don't think I picked them to win the division last year. I do think I ended up going Dallas, but I really like what they've been doing the past couple years. I'm a big fan of Ron Rivera and everything he did in Carolina, so I like the direction that this team is going. So we're going to do a little talking about what those guys did last year, fantasy finishes, and a little bit of over-unders here. And the first one we've got is Ryan Fitzpatrick. What do you expect out of him in 2021, Dennis? Obviously, again, last year was in and out, started out, had Miami on literally a playoff run, and then they pulled him to put Tua in. Overall, had a really good season, though. Where do you expect him to kind of fall into your fantasy ranks right now?
I think for if you're in a super flex redraft league, he's a perfect weight on quarterback QB2 target. He's going to have a couple duds. We know that. That's just who he is. But he's also going to have some big games. He's probably not going to be a Bob Lung consistency profile favorite. But he can. That team is going to have enough talent, I think, to make up for when he has those meltdowns. So I feel like he's probably inside the top 16, but he probably is going to have a QB 10 ceiling, so somewhere between 10 and 16.
Yeah, I agree. In QB, I think he's QB2. In his last time when he was kind of the full-time starter for Miami in 2019, he finished as QB 16. To me, he feels like a QB 15 to 20 finish. I think he could have a little bit of a higher ceiling, but I just don't believe on a Ron Rivera, Scott Turner coach team that you're going to see them out there gunslinging it a ton. I think he's a good passer. I think they'll have a pretty good team. They may not have to throw it as much as, say, when he was with Tampa Bay and it was line it up, because if you don't get to 60, you're not winning. Like Dennis said, he could have a poor game where the offense could struggle and only score 10 or 13 points and still win. We saw them fairly well shut down a Steelers offense last year that at the time was going great guns and be able to win kind of a slug-it-out game. So I think somewhere in that 15 to 20 range is where I would forecast.
Yeah, if I had to pick, I think I'd put him right in that same range, 15 to 20. I think he's going to be a decent QB2, and I agree with Dennis. He's a guy, if you want to wait now, you're likely going to have to grab some younger guys if you can at some point, especially if we're talking dynasty here, because Ryan Fitzpatrick, I don't know, is going to be long for the Washington football team after this year, but he's definitely a worthwhile target for this year, or possibly even trade candidate. If you're trying to win this year, maybe you need a quarterback who you can kind of count on getting you decent numbers all season long. I had an argument about that with Mac Jones on a different podcast at one point, because everybody seems to underrate these guys who finish right around the middle to high-end QB2s, and those guys matter because you can't have – not everybody has Patrick Mahomes and Kyler Murray as their top two quarterbacks on Superflex leagues. You have to have guys who are going to produce, and I think Fitzpatrick can do that.
I'm getting really, really warm on Mac Jones. I kind of like the situation he's in.
Hey, so do I.
Especially if he ends up with Julio Jones here.
I like the situation he's in, period. I feel like that offensive coordinator has made his whole reputation with a quarterback with Mac Jones's skill set.
I have to say, though, if you'd ever suffered through him being your head coach, you'd feel differently.
Apples to oranges, man. Apples to oranges. So I submitted it. I got an article that's going to be coming out in the magazine, and one of the I did do some rankings and then write up some of them. And that's exactly what I wrote up about Mac Jones, was that, he could very well be, his ceiling isn't going to be QB1 or QB5. His ceiling is probably QB 6, 7, 8. But his floor could very well end up being QB 14. And that's like, if you get that for 10 years in a system where they've done that with his skill set for so long, I don't know. It's hard to throw that away.
No, I'm 100% with you on draft night. I feel like I was arguing against every other person on campus to Canton because they all said that Mac Jones is horrible. And I said, you guys, everybody's comparing him to the top guys in that draft class, and that's not what he is. But what he is he can be a very productive quarterback, and in Superflex, that matters. If he's QB, like you said, if he finishes at QB 14 every year, I'll take that guy in a heartbeat, especially in rookie drafts where he's going at the end of the first round in Superflex League. Give it to me. Those points matter.
Second round. I've seen him go middle of the
everybody always looks at it and
Superflex.
says, "Oh, well, he's not going to be Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Kyler." Well, guess what? Likely, at best, only one team in the league is going to have those guys. You can't. It's not everybody can have Patrick Mahomes. So you have to have guys who can produce. If he's consistently producing at that quarterback level, it matters. Because if you got him, if you don't have him, and you're like, "Oh, well, I went Patrick Mahomes, and then I got no offense, Matt, Drew Lock, who's finishing at QB 25 or 24 every single year." Like, Mac Jones is outproducing him. That matters. So I think Drew Lock is good, though. It's just the only quarterback that come to my head because I saw the Denver.
I spent all afternoon in a 16-teamer trying to trade back into the first to get Mac Jones at like 1-9, 110, 111.
Here we go. I'm telling you, they have no faith in Mac Jones. They think he's absolute trash. So. All right, let's move on to the running back position here. Antonio Gibson, he finished his RB17 last year, 85 carries. What is that? 856.
That was Mckissick.
Oh, whoops, my bad. Good job, Matt. RB13 for Antonio Gibson, 170 carries, 795 yards with 11 touchdowns, 36 receptions for 247 yards. Matt, can he be top 15 again this year?
I mean, I think he can. What helped him last year was touchdowns, but I agree with Dennis. If he gets to that 220 and 225 carry range, gets closer to 1,000 yards, that could offset some TD regression. You figure he maybe doesn't get 11, maybe slides closer to 8. You can offset that. He could end up being a bigger piece of the passing game. I think the question is durability, and does he take a step up? Does he start taking more reps away from Mckissick as well? They don't have a ton of stuff behind him. I know you liked Jared Patterson, who they took as an undrafted free agent. They still have the corpse of Peyton Barber there somewhere, just waiting to haunt all of our dreams. But it feels like Gibson's backfield.
Yeah, I agree. Gibson with 220 carries, which, he's not a little guy. He's 225? 6 foot, 225.
Let's look here. I don't know if he's 225, but I know he
played wide receiver in college.
Yeah.
So he's well versed in the passing game.
It says he's 6'2", 220.
Okay.
So he's a big dude. He can lug the ball, and he's fast. So provided he can run low enough to not get injured, that's what you worry about with tall running backs is either are they big enough to take the hit a la Derrick Henry, or can they get down when they're running to, not take such a big impact when they're so upright. I like 220 and 50 catches out of him. That will put him into, low end RB1. I think
it's definitely the receptions for me that Dennis was just mentioning. I think keeps him right there, if not puts him right above 13, at least at worst, keeps him in the top 15, like the question is. I mean, I still think he's going to get the rush. I don't know if he gets many more than 170 rushes. I just kind of feel like that is right around maybe his cap, 170 to maybe 200. But I could see the receptions coming up, especially if he could stay healthy. He missed with turf toe last year. I think that was the only injury he missed with, but he missed a couple games because of the turf toe. Receptions jump up a little bit. Matt mentioned a little positive touchdown regression, and he could easily be in that top 15. I would rank him probably right around this range, 12, 13, 15 being the lowest. J.D. Mckissick finishes RB 17,
well, before we move on to
Yeah.
McKissick, I would like to point out to the court that Gibson only played in 13 games and got those 170 carries.
Interesting. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I'm not. I know he's big. He's bigger than I thought. I did not realize he was 220. I thought he was more like.
He's actually like the biggest running back they have. I looked up Barber's 5'11", 225, McKissick's 5'9", 175, and Patterson's not that big, I don't think either.
No, he's like 5'9", 200.
Yeah,
he's even lower than that. Yeah, I knew he wasn't big.
He is little.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Then maybe he will get 200 plus carries. I just, I don't know why I have this perception in my head that he's not as big as that either. I don't know. Maybe it's because he doesn't look it on the field. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of J.D. McKissick. I don't know. You
have to remember too. What's gonna throw all of us off is 17 games. There's an extra game thrown in there, so
that's true.
The barrier to get to 220. I mean, it's gonna take some thinking about what our metrics are going to be. It's probably take a couple of years to get into a groove with 17 games.
Yeah, add in the extra game. You're probably right. He's definitely going to go over 200. But it's more of the receptions. I still think that it's going to help boost him more. I mean, I definitely see him getting more than 36 receptions. J.D. McKissick finishes RB17 last year, as we already talked about. 85 carries, 356 yards, and a touchdown. 80 receptions for 589 yards and 2 touchdowns. A lot of that did come when Gibson was out, and he was really kind of viewed as the passing down back for a couple games there. He was carrying some fantasy teams if they were using him at one point before Gibson came back. What do you guys think about McKissick? Any shot? I'm going to drop it a little bit because obviously I don't think anybody thinks he finishes RB17. Do you guys have him finishing in the top 24? Do you think he could finish as a top 24 running back in 2021, Dennis?
I mean, a broken clock is right twice a day. So could he finish in the top 24? He could. If I'm rostering him, I am looking for the 0 RB truther in my league and trying to get a late second round pick out of him for 2022. So I feel like it's gonna he's gonna crush some people who are going, well, maybe he's not gonna get 100 targets, but he's gonna get 85. And he's going to come out of next season with like 45 targets.
Yeah, I feel more comfortable saying he's on the RB3, RB4 cusp.
Yeah.
They have better receivers now, too. I mean, last year, it wasn't just that Gibson was out some of those games. It's if you're looking out there and you're Alex Smith and you don't have the greatest line in front of you, which that line's gotten a little better, helps Gibson, but helps everybody else. You don't have the greatest line, and you're like, do I put up a prayer to Cam Sims or do I jump it off to JD and let him run?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's my thing. Looking at it with McKissick, I think he's clearly going to be kind of the loser here in the Curtis Samuel signing because I think Gibson probably sees a couple more catches or increases there because he'll be on the field more often. And I think Samuel is going to see increases in catches and possibly carries as well. And I think that's going to come more at the detriment of J.D. McKissick than Antonio Gibson. So, yeah, I'm with you guys. I don't think he finishes as an RB2. I would say at best you're getting a middle-tier RB3, and even that I think might be a little bit of a stretch this year. Again, assuming Antonio Gibson stays healthy. Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 20 last year, 87 receptions for 1,118 yards and 4 touchdowns. He was great last year. Dennis, do you expect him to finish higher than wide receiver 20 in 2021?
I do. I don't think his catches are going to go up a ton. I do feel like he's going to get maybe 15 or 20 more targets, which is going to push him into the 95-ish range for catches, which is up from 87. I if I remember correctly. But he's going to have a little more yardage. He's going to get some more touchdowns, and that's going to bump him up into that low-end RB1 or wide receiver 1 range for 2021.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I think between wide receiver 12 and 15 is where I'd slot him.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to be closer to 15, but I agree with you. I was trying to pull up his ADP right now, but I'm still not finding him. I don't know. There's no way he's getting drafted behind Cooper Kupp, is he? I must have just missed him somewhere. DK Metcalf, Calvin Ridley, A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Allen Robinson. There we go.
There's wide receiver 12 in PPR right now.
Coming off, it looks like he's got an ADP of 312. So coming off the board in the 3rd round, it's not bad. But wide receiver 12, I think that's fair-ish value for him. I do think that's it's weird because I think the wide receiver is so good at the top end. I feel like that might be his ceiling is 12, but I would say at worst, I think 15 is kind of his floor. We already talked a little bit about Samuel, but again, with Carolina last year, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns on 77 receptions. I'm sorry, that was rushing. 77 receptions for 851 yards and 3 touchdowns. Where do you guys see him finishing? You guys both said you think he can be a wide receiver 2, correct, in 2021? I know Dennis
he'll be
did.
just outside. I have him more in the probably wide receiver 30 range.
Yeah, I feel like if they are gonna up their passing game, be more efficient in their passing game, and he's the number 2 guy, I don't feel how he could be that low. I still feel like the combination of 20 rushes for 180 games and a touchdown or 2, with probably pushing 100 targets. So I like him at the low end wide receiver 2.
Matt, do you expect anything out of De'Ami Brown this year?
I mean, I think he'll be involved. I believe in him more than Antonio Gandy-Golden.
Wait, was that question about De'Ami Brown or Curtis Samuel?
No, this is right now. I just asked a question about De'Ami Brown. No, you were good on what you. Yeah, we were. Right.
Well, I was like, wait a minute, I was looking at something.
I still don't think they're not gonna be the Cowboys in terms of pass attempts and everything. And I think when they have 2 pass catching running backs I still think Thomas is going to be involved, and they have Samuel and McLaren. That's already talking about being a more dynamic offense than they were last year. So I think De'Ami Brown will be involved. They'll try to get him the ball in some creative ways. But I think you're right. Some of those other guys are not exactly going to go away, and they'll have a rotation. For fantasy purposes, he's an interesting guy to be taking in dynasty leagues, but I don't know if I'm expecting anything substantial, barring injury.
I concur. Weren't there issues with his hands?
I don't think so. I think that was Daz Newsome, if I'm remembering correctly. But I agree with you guys. Yeah, I don't think he's going to be much of anything this year. Maybe I could see him being a big part of that offense in the future, but I really do think it's going to be geared more toward McLaurin and Samuel in the running game, which is and as the guy we're about to talk about too, someone has to get left out. Not everybody can be top fantasy finishers, and I think Logan Thomas is likely the 2nd or 3rd receiving option in this offense, and he finishes tight end 4 last year with 72 receptions, 670 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He was a bright spot in 2020. Can he do it again in 2021, though, Dennis?
Not tight end 4. I believe he's going to move into that morass of like tight end 6 to 20, where they're going to all be separated by like 1.7 points per game.
Yeah.
So he's gonna do okay. He's a late round tight end target. It's if you don't get one of the big 3 and potentially 4 with Kyle Pitts, then he's a late target, and you look to take him at value in a redraft league. But yeah, I'm not. I expect some regression there.
Yeah, I think he finishes between 7 and 10.
Yeah, I agree with Matt. I would say 10 is the lowest. I would not have him outside of my top 10. I think getting a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick helps, and I do think he probably is still, if they're not rushing the ball in the red zone, their best red zone option as well. So I like him.
Yeah, isn't he 6'6"?
Yeah. I expect him to keep pretty close, at least good with touchdowns, and then that'll, as Dennis was mentioning with the tight end scoring there with everybody kind of being separated by a little bit. Those touchdowns matter for tight end, and I think if he gets a bunch of those, he'll still keep at least some decent value. All right, the New York Giants, they finished at 6-10 last year, second place. Key additions, Kenny Galladay, John Ross, Devontae Booker, Corey Clement, Kyle Rudolph, cornerback Adoree Jackson. Their key losses, Golden Tate, Dion Lewis, Wayne Gallman, and then their draft picks, everybody's favorite first-round draft pick, Kadarius Toney, Azeez Ojulari, the linebacker, and Aaron Robinson, the cornerback. So, kicking it off with obviously the position that matters most for most teams, quarterback and Daniel Jones. We all thought he might take a big step forward last year. Did not happen. Does he do that this year, Dennis?
Well, it's this year or bust. Now, I will say, as somebody who rostered a great number of shares of Darius Slayton, I was a little bit bummed out about the season he had last year. And then they signed Kenny Galladay and they draft Kadarius Toney. But I feel like it's Toney and Sterling Shepard that are battling for a spot. Slayton he's the one that's got the deep speed. So, Toney's got some speed, but he's dynamic with the ball in his hands, but he's got a long way to go to develop. And Kenny Galladay's got to stay healthy. I think if Galladay can stay healthy, then they've got, with Ingram and Toney and Galladay and Barkley back, and Slayton and Shepard, they have a lot of weapons. And so it's put up or shut up time this year for Daniel Jones. Where did he finish last year? Let me look at our notes here.
It's QB 24.
Yeah.
So I could see a QB 16, 17 season out of him. Quarterback is pretty competitive. Now, Jones, we're all about the Konami code quarterback. I won't say Jones is a Konami code quarterback, but he's more mobile than most quarterbacks once you get past the Lamars and the Kylers and the Russes. He's in that second tier of quarterback mobilities with guys like Trevor Lawrence and some guys like that I think Dak Prescott even probably is in that second tier now. So is he going to, he can get you some yards on the ground. He can avoid. If he pulls his decision-making together, I'm pretty cool with him as my QB2 with a, QB 16, 18 kind of finish.
Yeah, I mean, the pressure is really on. We've talked about there are a few quarterbacks coming into this kind of being a make-it-or-break-it year. His fellow draft classmate Drew Lock, we know a lot of pressure on him, but Daniel Jones low-key had a very underwhelming 2020, only threw for 11 touchdowns. That offense for the Giants was ugly to watch a lot last year. They were a team that benefited from having a terrible division and some pretty good defense. They have surrounded him with weapons. If they can get Saquon Barkley back, that will make a big difference. Wayne Gallman wasn't bad last year, but he's not Saquon Barkley. Having a more consistent running game might help them. He is kind of out of excuses. They added a lot of pieces on offense to try to boost that up. So he needs to take a step forward or else they're going to be looking somewhere else.
So I did not pay attention to what I was doing. No, anybody mentioned the title, I've been notified. Yes, I apologize. I put WTF, not WFT, so I apologize for all the Washington football team fans out there. That was my bad. That was it has been fixed. I do apologize about that though. Anyway,
things happen. It's too close together. Washington, pick a damn mascot.
Well,
It's
and
supposed to by next year, right? Isn't that the
truth be told, we talk a lot more about WTF than we do about WFT.
Yeah, that is very true.
I mean, not us, just everybody does.
I do agree with what you guys are saying. And I hope that he kind of shows us what we saw flashes of in his rookie season. I think Dennis mentioned it. I am kind of in the same boat as him, as I have a couple shares of Daniel Jones and a couple of some very big super flex leagues I would really like to pan out. So I'm really hoping that he bounces back this year. And then I agree. They have really kind of built this team around him. They've worked to rebuild the offensive line. They've given him a ton of offensive weapons, although I will say that having all those weapons doesn't matter when your offensive coordinator is Jason Garrett. But that aside, he does have the weapons around him to succeed. I hope that he takes that step forward. I do agree this is a make or break year for him. If he doesn't, I would imagine that means that they're going to finish pretty poorly again, and they're likely going to try and go quarterback in the draft next year. So big year for Daniel Jones moving forward.
Well, I mean, if you look at his career so far through 2 years, I mean, he threw 24 touchdowns his rookie season.
Yeah.
He barely broke 3,000 yards, and that was in 13 starts. So a 3,800-yard season with 20 touchdowns doesn't seem like a stretch. He needs to bump up his completion percentage. He's career 62% completion percentage. But when you add in those are sack yards. I think he rushed for 400-plus yards last season.
He did, 423. But that's the thing. In 2 more starts last year, he threw for less yardage and dramatically less touchdowns. That is what's alarming.
Well, so in his second year with an injured Saquon Barkley, he wasn't ready or able to put the team on his back and carry them. I mean, that's kind of how. So he's got to show them something this year.
So instead of Danny Dimes, he was Danny Wooden Pennies.
Yes.
That's the worst name. I hate that name so much.
So I will say that, and I heard about this the other day, and though some of this is a little bit fluky because you have to have everything go right for you, but did you know that out of all these, as Dennis mentioned, Konami code quarterbacks, Daniel Jones is the only one with an 80-yard rush? Now, Lamar Jackson does not have that. Kyler Murray does not have that. Josh Allen does not have that. Now, granted, he didn't score. He obviously, everybody remembers the famous play he tripped before getting into the end zone. But Daniel Jones is a little bit of a better rusher than he gets credit for. So he's not obviously on the same level as those guys, but go ahead.
I'm also going to say, as a team, the Giants had more rushing yards and more rushing touchdowns in 2020 than they did in 2019.
Yeah. So I think that this team can be better. Can Andrew Thomas be a little bit better this year? He was, a guy that I was very high on. I was hoping the Browns were going to be in on him. He was not good, I think is the polite thing to say. Can he improve and help improve that offensive line? So it's a big year for a lot of these guys.
And didn't they get one of the tackles back?
Yeah, Solder.
Somebody used to play for the Patriots. Yeah, Nate
Solder back this year too because he opted out last year. So Saquon Barkley has been limited to 15 games the past 2 seasons. Can he stay on the field in 2021, Matt? And what do you think that means for the Giants?
You really got to hope he can. He was incredible as a rookie, and he's still a very high dynasty draft pick. Probably still going to be a very high redraft draft pick because the talent and the potential is there. He was hampered in 2019 by the ankle injury. Didn't always look great, but still managed to gut out 13 games. But last year, you got 34 rushing yards, 6 receptions for 60 yards passing, and that was all he had last year. So hopefully a big bounce back here. I think that will mean a lot to the Giants, have more consistency. He's also a very good pass catcher, which I don't know what that means for all the receivers they have, but especially if you're a fantasy player, somebody who's on your team, you'd like to see him put in a good full season.
Yeah, I'm going to bet on him staying healthy. And so if he stays healthy, you're looking at a 290 carries, maybe 280 carries. I'm not worried about the likes of Devontae Booker or Elijah Penny or Gary Brightwell. Raquel Armstead, who is he finally off the COVID list? I'm not sure.
He was Raquel Armstead was from Jacksonville.
He signed with the Giants just recently. Yeah. But yes, he's off the COVID list, yeah.
So if I don't think Barkley is going to get 121 targets like he did his rookie season, but I could see him getting 75 or 80 like he did his second year. If that's he's the best player on the team. Yeah. He got injured last year, and it is what it is. But he's still going to come back and be the best player on the team. So if he gets 280 carries, 75 or 80 targets, I'm down for that.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I loved Barkley. Obviously, last year, him going down hurt me in one of my main dynasty leagues. I was built around him, Nick Chubb, and Zeke Elliott, all three of which sucked for the most part of last year, I know. Mostly Chubb because of the injury. Chubb's still amazing, but it was not great. It was not fun.
And Zeke because he averaged 65 yards a game.
Yeah, it was not fun starting like DJ Dallas, and I don't even remember who my other running back was for most of that season because it was bad. So I expect I hope that Barkley is able to stay healthy. And if he does, I do think that he will still go back to being one of the best running backs in the league. I wouldn't put him over McCaffrey, even though McCaffrey still has some of those injury question marks as well here the past season. But I do think he'd be top 5 for me easily. And I think it's going to be great for the Giants. It's going to help open things up, even if it's not – even if he's not running the ball well, which I also think is fair to say. He hasn't always been the most accomplished rusher. He's done a lot of damage in the receiving game, but – regardless, him being a kind of a guy right there in the short area for Daniel Jones and for him to dump the ball off to, I think is going to be huge for him and to help out Daniel Jones as well, maybe avoid those sacks and possibly even fumbles. The Giants did make a bunch of big moves at wide receiver, though. They brought, obviously, returning Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard, but now added Kenny Galladay from the Lions, John Ross from the Bengals, and drafted rookie Kadarius Toney. Dennis, what are you expecting from this receiver group?
Well, I'm not expecting anything from John Ross. It's to me, I get it, man. You can't teach fast, and John Ross is fast, but that's literally it. He's fast one time, then he's injured. That's John Ross. I feel like Slayton, he's going to need to bounce back from that disappointing season last year. Looking at the numbers, I guess at 50 receptions and 750 yards, that's a lot better than the image that I have in my head of what his season was. But it's not a terrific season when I think he was counted on to be the wide receiver one by many fantasy analysts along with me. So, it was a disappointing year for him. It's probably not going to, now that they've signed Galladay and they've drafted Toney and they're getting Barkley back, I'm not going to count on Slayton to all of a sudden get, 80 catches. He's probably going to go from 50 to 65 and from 750 yards. He's shown the propensity to make a big play. So I think if he can get 950 yards on 65 or 70 catches, I think that's going to be a great season for Slayton, which is going to probably put him in the mid to low wide receiver 3 range, I think. Were we talking about him specifically or the receivers in general?
Receivers in general.
Okay. I didn't want to go on a tangent. I'm getting a little lost here. I like Sterling Shepard, but like I said, I think he's going to him and Kadarius Toney are kind of both fighting for that short area role. And until as Toney develops as a receiver, Shepard's still going to have a role, but Shepard is just not nearly as dynamic as Kadarius Toney. So when Toney, as he gets another portion of the route tree added to his skill set, that's going to keep cutting into Sterling Shepard's snaps, Shepard's targets. So I think if you have Shepard, you might want to hope he has a good first couple weeks and see if you can move him.
I don't know what you're moving him for. Darius Slayton and Sterling Shepard were wide receiver 5s last year without the kind of competition that they're going to have now. You bring in a rookie, you bring in Kenny Galladay. If Barkley's back, he's a receiving threat. We haven't even yet talked about the fact that they added Kyle Rudolph to go with Evan Ingram to beef up their tight end room. That's just a lot of mouths to feed, and I'm not convinced that Daniel Jones is the guy to support a high-flying passing offense. So Galladay, to me, I still have him in the wide receiver 2 range if he can stay on the field because he's Kenny Galladay. The rest of them, I think, are hit and miss dart throws, deep end flexes. I don't have any confidence that Slayton can establish himself and emerge and get up to wide receiver 3. He couldn't do it last year with no one else and with supposed chemistry with Daniel Jones. It feels like the drafting of a wide receiver in the first round, splashing out money to Kenny Galladay when no one was splashing out huge money, long-term deals to wide receivers, and getting Barkley back was an indictment that they're saying the receivers they had weren't going to cut it.
Yeah, I think the only one I'd believe in bringing back some kind of value right now is Galladay. I mean, I like Slayton, but I don't know if they're even going to scheme stuff for him deep. I don't know adding Sterling Shepard being healthy, adding a Kadarius Toney helps him at all. I mean, it helps having Kenny Galladay on the other side, but I would imagine when it comes down to it, he'd rather be throwing the ball to Kenny Galladay than Darius Slayton. Now, I don't know offhand how many shots they took deep. And then Sterling Shepard, I mean, I like Shepard, but he can't stay healthy. I don't think Kadarius Toney is going to beat him out for that slot job this year. I think Toney is probably a draft pick more for the future and being the slot receiver of their future when Shepard moves on after this year. But I want to believe in Daniel Jones. I really do. I think he's a decent quarterback. And if he proves that this year, then I do think outside of Kenny Galladay, where I agree with Matt, he'll be probably a high-end wide receiver 2. I do think one of these guys could have a high-end wide receiver 3, maybe back-end wide receiver 2 finish. I just don't know which one it is and which one I want to believe in because I don't think Evan Ingram is going to be that guy at tight end. We'll obviously get to him in a little bit, but I think Evan Ingram's time has kind of passed, at least with the Giants. I hope he moves on to another team and is able to kind of break out and show us what we saw his rookie season. Daniel Jones, I'm going to do a little bit of over-under here with him. So he finished his QB 24 last year, 2,943 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 423 rushing yards with a touchdown. Over-under QB 17 in 2021, Dennis.
I'm going to say under because didn't I set him at like 16 to 20?
Yes.
I was talking earlier, so I'm going to hedge my bet and take the side of it that has the most spaces and say under.
Well, so wouldn't under mean you think he's going to be 16 or better?
All right, we're not going to do that again this year, are we?
Well, under means under the number. Over.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm taking the over too because he could get to QB 18 to 20, but he could also, I think his range of outcomes between QB 15 and QB 30, honestly.
That's a fair point.
All right, so in my defense, when we say over under, I think over is good and under is bad.
Gotcha. I am going to take the under. I'm going to buy all in on this finally being the year for Daniel Jones. I think he's going to be 15 or 16. So put the number at 17. I will take the under. Now, I'm not giving myself a lot of room, but I'm going to go ahead and ride with Daniel Jones this year.
Are you voting with your rosters?
I am very much so. It's what I do. I'm very bad
Speak
about
him into
that.
existence.
Exactly. I love
Let's manifest this.
Throw it into the ether. Let's see if we can get a little bit of love back from the fantasy guys here. So Saquon Barkley finishes RB 120 last year. Again, obviously only played in the 2 games. 19 carries for 34 yards, 6 receptions for 60 yards. Over under on. So they play 17 games this year. Let's go with 14 games.
I'm taking the over 14. I think he plays a full season.
Matt?
I'm gonna take the over too. I think he's due.
I really hope so. I really, really hope so. So then, since we're all taking the over here, expect him to play a full season. Matt, do you expect him to be a top 5 back?
I think it's possible. I don't believe in the Giants, so I think it's more likely he ends up in the 5 to 10 range.
Top 5. Henry,
Kamara,
Kamara,
possibly
Kamara,
Aaron Jones.
Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, I will. Cook, Taylor.
That's probably it. I would think so. That are all in the discussion.
Yeah.
So like 8 guys for 5 spots. No big deal.
If I had to
Najee Harris,
I
after
don't
he
know if
goes
Najee
for
goes
2,000 yards, catches 150 passes.
I'd like it. I bought all in on some 101s this year to get Najee, so I'd be happy with it. But I don't know if he goes that high.
Yeah, I'm gonna say let's go. Barkley finishing as RB, top 5 RB.
I'm gonna go with it as well. I love Barkley. I've loved him ever since I saw him his sophomore year at Penn State. I think he wants to come out and prove everybody wrong. I think he's still got 1 year left on his. Or I don't think the Giants have picked it up yet, have they, or did they?
I think they did, are going to.
So
can't imagine them.
Well, they're one of the organizations I could imagine not doing it. So, but I think you're right. I do think that they picked it up. I would love to see him get a shot at a second contract because I think he's just one of the transcendent running backs in the game. And if he can stay healthy,
Giants did pick up his 5th year off. Yeah.
Kenny Galladay struggled to stay on the field last year due to the back injury. Some of that, I think, was just also the Lions were so bad. I kind of feel like maybe it was why rush yourself when you wasn't even sure if he was going to be there much longer. Dennis, do you think he sees 100 targets this year for the Giants?
I think he leads the team in targets.
Yes,
Matt, you
I
agree?
think he sees 100, yeah.
All right, so we all believe he will go over 100 because I agree with you guys. He did finish as wide receiver 101 last year, 20 receptions, 338 yards, and 2 touchdowns in just 5 games. That we talked about him being a wide receiver 2 earlier, so I will put the over-under. I'm going to make you guys over-under at wide receiver 14 next year.
Over.
Yeah, I'm going to take just a slight over.
Yeah, I think 15 to 20 was the range I was going to go.
I knew I should have gone 15. I was trying to kind of figure out what number to throw in there.
I still would have gone over.
I kind of want to go under. I think he could barely break in because he was a top 12 wide receiver 2 years ago, wasn't he? I'm not misremembering that.
I'm going to look real quick. He had 65. He had a lot of touchdowns. Let's see.
That's all I needed to do it for the Giants.
He was wide receiver 9 in 2019.
Yeah. Going under, baby. I think he can get to wide receiver 12 again. I mean, they can't give they could give Barkley the ball every single time down at the goal line, but they brought in Kenny Galladay for a reason. He's going to be their biggest threat in the red zone. I'm going to go for it. He brings back some of those touchdowns. If he gets 100-plus targets and he's getting touchdowns, as long as he stays healthy, I think he could easily finish up there in those. Obviously, the health is a big question. But, hey, I traded DeAndre effing Hopkins, and I got back Kenny Galladay in the deal. So we already know that I talk for my fantasy rosters on here. Kenny Galladay, I need you, buddy. I need you. All right. How will the Giants use Kadarius Toney this year, Dennis?
I think he's going to have a very limited route tree because he needs to develop. They're going to manufacture touches for him, probably some bubble screens, some short area slants, things like that. And then as they implement more of the playbook for him, then they'll expand what it is he shows he can do in practice. I think if you're drafting Kadarius Toney this season in Dynasty, you're not expecting a lot. I mean, he's been going late second round in rookie drafts, and it's crazy because I watched the Kadarius Toney movements in rookie drafts, and I'm like, when you get to 2.9, 2.10, it's hard to you've got to just say, all right, the Giants spent a first round draft pick on him. You've got to spend that rookie draft capital in your dynasty draft. But then I see also Tutu Atwell, who was drafted in the second round, and I'm like, I don't care if it's the 5-12. I'm not drafting fucking Tutu Atwell.
Well, I took him one time, and I sort of was filled with regret, even though that was like a fourth-round pick. So I understand how you're feeling. Tony, I agree with you. I think they're going to scheme to get him the ball. You don't take a guy at the 20th pick in the first round without intending him to have some kind of on-the-field impact, unless you're the 49ers drafting a quarterback. So I think he'll be involved. I think it sucks some potential targets from Shepard and Slayton. I think Barkley will do the same thing to both of them. Honestly, I would be surprised if any other Giants wide receiver makes it higher than a wide receiver 4.
Yeah, I mean, I said this earlier. It's kind of been my biggest issue with Kadarius Toney. I just don't think Jason Garrett is that creative as an offensive coordinator, so I don't know how they're going to scheme things for him. I mean, they were trying to scheme Evan Ingram in rushing plays last year. Maybe if they do that with Kadarius Toney, he'll be fine, but I'm not really that sold on Jason Garrett's creative offensive play calling. I do think Toney could do something if Shepard gets hurt, which could be a big if. We've seen Shepard struggle with injuries for the past couple seasons. Outside of that, I still think Shepard's going to be the guy there in the slot, and then Slayton and Galladay are going to be the other starters. So I don't think Toney does much. Maybe he's kickoff, punt coverage stuff until Shepard gets hurt. What do you guys expect from Slayton and Shepard? So last year, Slayton finishes wide receiver 56 with 50 receptions, 751 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Sterling Shepard, wide receiver 52 with 66 receptions, 656 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Matt.
So I think Slayton will probably be right around the same area. Shepard probably takes a little bit of a step back because I tend to agree with Dennis that Toney eats into his workload.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the 60 to 65 receptions for Slayton, 900 yards, maybe 5 to 6 touchdowns. I just think the team in general is going to take a step forward. I don't know how big a step, but with Barkley back, I feel like there's going to be some improvement in the offense. Shepard's going to be the odd man out, I think, and unless Toney just completely flops, or if it ends up being a situation where, Shepard gets hurt, or, who knows, maybe Toney comes in and wows him with his deep ball prowess. And so
that's going to be John Ross.
Yeah, no shit. And so then that leaves Toney moving a little to the outside some that we weren't necessarily expecting. So, I think Sterling Shepard might be headed towards that Jamison Crowder, always undervalued, always overperforming portion of his career. So I'm probably undervaluing him.
Are we overlooking John Ross? I mean, we haven't mentioned him really, except for taking shots at him, realistically.
I mean, let's see if he makes the team first.
Okay. Fair enough.
It wasn't a huge investment of a deal, and I don't, that was before they signed Galladay. It was before they knew they were going to draft Toney.
It's well within the range of outcomes. Actually, looking at the R-Lads depth chart, they have Ross slotted as the starting slot receiver.
Oh,
with Slayton and Galladay on the outside, Shepard backing up Galladay. So I don't know how much I believe that depth chart. It's well within the range of outcomes for Ross to have 40, 45 catches and average 20 yards of reception.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to have a ton of targets. I think he's going to have to maximize the targets he gets. But it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up stepping into the deep ball role if others are struggling with it, just because he's going to be faster than everybody else. But he needs to figure it. He hasn't figured out the NFL in 3 years. So,
well, I mean, some of that I think is definitely injury. I mean, he had a really good start to the Bengals season 2 years ago, maybe now at this point, where he was going off and then he got injured. It's been the hamstrings, which I feel like obviously someone with his speed that matters. If your hamstrings are constantly getting injured, that's I think the biggest thing that's hurt him. We mentioned earlier that the Giants brought in Kyle Rudolph. They obviously have tight end Evan Ingram as well, who a lot of people were high on after his rookie season. He finished as tight end 18 last year, 63 receptions, 654 yards, and a touchdown. Kyle Rudolph with the Vikings finished as tight end 41, 28 receptions, 334 yards, and a touchdown. Dennis, do you think Rudolph eats into Evan Ingram's production at all?
Well, he's got better hands. So if Ingram gets the drops, I could see them saying, hey, set out this series, and then Rudolph catches a couple, and then Garrett will be like, hey, set out this one too. But, I mean, Rudolph has all the agility of Herman Munster. So at this stage of his career, he's not getting off the line fast. The only thing he really is tall anymore. So he could garner snaps. It wouldn't surprise me if he outsnaps Ingram just because of being a better blocker. But I expect Ingram to be the leader in the tight end room when it comes to fantasy production.
Yeah, I think Ingram will be the leader too, but I think it really, between adding Rudolph, signing Kenny Galladay, and having Barkley back, that makes the red zone prospects for Evan Ingram might be a lot worse. That's what I think this stage in his career, I think that's where you're going to see more Rudolph. That's what he did blocking Irv Smith. Might be the same kind of.
So Ingram's going to decline from his one touchdown last year?
Well, that's the thing. The hope had to have been that maybe he could get more. The entire pass offense was anemic. They only had 12 passing touchdowns as a team. So I think the hope was, if you have Ingram, can he get better touchdown luck? Well, now it seems like he might even have fewer opportunities.
Yeah, I would imagine they're bringing him in more to help the offensive line block, but he has excelled in the red zone the past couple seasons. I think bringing in guys like Kenny Galladay, it's not going to help Evan Ingram at all. But I mentioned earlier, I really think that I hope that if he doesn't really do much this year, he at least is able to move on, because I still like Evan Ingram. I think he's got a lot of upside, but injuries have kind of hampered him as well. Just really quick, Dennis, since we won't have you on Thursday, I know we did the schedule game earlier, but just kind of your really quick pick on where you think the NFC East is going to end up finishing first to last.
Oh, I feel pretty good. I think the Redskins, the Washington football team, will win the division, followed by the Cowboys, and then the Eagles. I feel like the Eagles are in for a last place finish, so that's going to put the Giants in third.
Matt, well, we'll talk about it on Thursday. All right, so
I don't think any of us like the Giants that much when we did our schedule.
Well, I mean, when I did the schedule thing, I'm pretty sure I had them at 1-16, so that'll change because I don't think they're that bad. I was kind of surprised when I looked. I was like, oh wow, that's really, really, really bad. So I actually think I had them and the Eagles only winning one game in that division. So it's not great, Bob, but that will do it for us today. As I mentioned, Matt and myself will be back on Thursday. We will be talking about the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles, and then you will see us again back next Monday talking. What are we talking about, Matt? Which division?
The AFC East. So it will be Buffalo and Miami.
Yeah, those are both two very exciting teams, actually. So I'm looking forward to that one much more than Thursday's episode. So we will see you guys again Thursday. Until then, everybody have a great day. We'll